Now that we've learned a bit about migrations, we can switch over and talk about Laravel's active record implementation, which is called Eloquent. I think you're really going to like it. Now, if I switch over to the terminal and I run PHP Artisan, you'll see that right here we have a number of file generators. The one we want is right here, make an Eloquent model class. So think of it this way. When using Active Record, you will have one class that would represent a single row from the associated database table. So if I have an articles table, then my Eloquent model might be called article. If I have a users table, then my Eloquent model will be called user, and so on and so forth. So why don't we see what this might look like? PHP Artisan make a model called article. All right, let's take a look. If I bring back this sidebar, we will find this directly as a child of the app directory. So if we open that up, here's what we get. Just a little bit of boilerplate to get us started. The important thing, though, is to notice that our class is extending this parent model. And this is a fairly complex class, so don't feel like you have to take this all in right now. But specifically, we have things like save. This allows us to fetch a record from the database, modify it in a very easy and simple way, and then call methods like save to persist it. And of course, we also have things like update or find or a number of various things that will prove to be incredibly useful to you. So now that we have our model, well, how can we just play around with things for a bit? And for that, we can use another artisan command called tinker. If I run PHP artisan tinker, this gives me a nice and useful command line interface for working with the Laravel codebase. And it's great for trying out functions, doing a bit of PHP in general. All of this stuff will be available to us. So with that in mind, why don't we play around with this new article Eloquent class that we created? Why don't we begin by simply newing it up? Article equals new app article. And there we go. We have a new article object. But now we want to fill it with attributes, right? And if I switch back to refresh your memory, when we created our articles table, we specified that we need a title, a body, some timestamps, as well as a published at timestamp. So why don't we begin adding those? And Eloquent gives us a nice and simple way to do that. Almost like property access. Article title equals my first article. Next, why don't we do the body as well? And we'll just do lorem ipsum there. Now, here's one cool thing. The timestamps will be applied automatically, so you don't have to manually do that. It'll just be set to the current time. But for the published at field, why don't we set that explicitly? Article published at will be, how about the current time? For that, we can use a popular library that Laravel pulls in out of the box called Carbon. So we will reference Carbon and just say now, the current time. And there we go. It's January 21st at the time of this recording. So now we've filled up our article object. We can review it like that, or I can even use methods like toArray to review the attributes that we've applied. So now we've built up the object, but it hasn't yet been persisted to the database. That's our next step. And you've already learned about the save method, article save. And it returns true, which means we successfully updated it. Why don't we see if it worked? And I'll show you two ways to verify it. To begin, let's just go directly into our database. SQLite 3, storage, database. And now if I do a select star from articles, we can see it. Very, very easy. Or if I switch back to PHP Artisan Tinker, we can always run a query here. App, article, fetch everything from that table, and I will cast that to an array to make it really easy for us to see. And there you go. One item was returned. All right, so we have now persisted our article to the database. Don't forget we have access to that variable. Why don't we now update something? And you'll see how easy this is. We already have our object, so why don't we just say title equals my updated first article. All right, we've updated an attribute, so once again, we will persist it. Article save. And now once again, if we run that same query, you'll see it's been modified. So what about basic tasks that you often do? For example, how about select star from the table name where the ID equals what you feed it? Okay, we've all written that many, many times, right? What would that look like within Eloquent? Well, let's try it out. Article equals app article, find, and then we give it the ID. In this case, 1. And now we fetch just the one row from the table. And once again, if we cast that to an array, we have our data, which means we can echo it out however we wish. But what about other things? For example, select star from articles where, how about the body equals lorem ipsum? We want to find any articles that have this exact body. How would we reproduce that with Eloquent? Okay, well, once again, of course that was going to error out, by the way. We could say article equals app article where, this time we're going to add a where clause, the body is equal to lorem ipsum. All right, so we've added our where clause. Now I want to get the results. So in this case, that's going to return to me a collection. Notice here, Illuminate Database Eloquent Collection. You'll learn a little bit more about Laravel collections in the future, but think of them as sort of like arrays on steroids. They give us a lot of flexibility for how we filter things, reduce things, add things, stuff like that. But don't worry, we'll get to that. But now, in this case, what if we actually wanted to say, give me the very first record that matches this where clause? Okay, we only have to change one thing. Rather than using get to fetch a collection, I will use first to get the very first result. And now this time the result is different. It's just the general article class. And once again, we can say article body to echo out the values. All right, so let's move on. We learned the, what I would say, slow way, where we say article equals a new article, and then we fill up the attributes one by one. What if instead we want to do it all at the same time? What might that look like? Well, let me show you. This time we'll say article equals app article create, with the difference being we're going to pass an array of values. So for example, title is a new article, body is new body, and finally published at will be carbon now. So let's close that out and run it. However, what happened here? So we got a mass assignment exception. And this is actually Laravel protecting us. We talk about this a lot on the site. So if you want a more dedicated lesson, just search for mass assignment at laracast.com. But to give you the basic idea here, when we pass an array of attributes to a method like create, we are mass assigning them, or we are assigning them en masse. And when you do that, you have to be very careful that the end user, or in other words, the person filling out the form, isn't secretly trying to manipulate you or take advantage of you or modify things so that when this big array is passed to your create method, you don't suddenly, for example, change the owner of a record from you to them. Or as another example, update their account so that they're no longer a user, but they're actually an administrator. If you're not careful about that and you don't protect your application against these sorts of things, users will take advantage of you. And remember, just because you don't offer some field in a form doesn't mean that they can't edit the form, adjust the name, add an input, do whatever they want, and then submit it. And if you just take that submitted form, you serialize it, and then you throw that to something like this create method, well, now you can begin to see how we can get taken advantage of. So we want to protect ourselves against that. And luckily, out of the box, Laravel's smart enough to do this for you. If we try to do something like this without explicitly defining which attributes may be mass assigned, Laravel's going to get mad and throw a mass assignment exception. And this is a good thing. So let's fix that. We're going to switch back and we will return to our article model. And I'm going to set a field here, protected fillable. This is fillable fields for the article. Or in other words, which attributes am I okay with being mass assigned? As an example, things like ID. Well, are you okay with somebody changing the ID of a record? No, so you wouldn't include it here. The same with things like maybe the user ID. If you're not okay with them changing that, then make sure it's not within this array. So in our case, we're fine with the title, we're fine with the body, and maybe we're fine with the published at field. These are the ones that may be mass assigned. And that way, if the end user, the person filling out the form, tries to be sneaky and they adjust the name of an input to try to update something else or some other column, we will just ignore it. It's not included within this array, so we can discard it. And that way, we better secure our application. All right, so we've updated this. We're going to try this one more time. PHP Artisan Tinker. I will then press up to return to our last command. And this time, if we run it, it worked. So the difference with this approach is when we call create, it fills the attributes and then it saves it or persists it all in one. So you don't have to explicitly call save. Let's try it out. App, article, get everything, and cast it to an array. And now we have 2 rows here. So to finish up, why don't we find the record with an ID of 2 and update its body and then persist it. Okay, I'm going to show you 2 ways to do that. We'll say article equals app article find the record that has an ID of 2. All right, we've already learned this. I hope you're working along because, of course, that's the best way to commit this stuff to memory. Actually write it out manually. So we have our article. We're going to update it like so, and then we will save it. So it will be persisted back to the database. Now, if we once again cast this to an array, it works. Now, another way to do that would be to call an update method. And this is similar to the create method. I will call update, and I will pass an array of attributes that should be changed. In this case, body will be, how about updated again? And now it's done. So this is what I mean when I said it's similar to the create method. We call update, it will fill the object with the new attributes, and then it will save itself in the process. So now, if we once again do this call and cast it to an array, you'll see that our body has in fact been updated. All right, so I think that's enough for Eloquent 101. There's so much more to cover, but this will get you started. As some homework, I want you to play around with this stuff and really get comfortable with it. Create a migration to add some kind of dummy table. Maybe something like tasks. So you would create a migration, create tasks table. You would open the file, set the fields, and then migrate your database. And then you would create your model. So PHP Artisan make model task. And then you would use PHP Artisan Tinker to play around with things. Play around with creating a new record, updating a record, fetching all records or all tasks, manipulating them. Try to get comfortable with all of these basic operations. And once you do feel confident, then move on to the next video and we'll take things a step further.